Okay, so tonight we'll be covering performing non-technical tests, and this includes social engineering and also physical security tests on facilities. And I typically schedule someone each semester to come in and teach lockpicking, so I need to talk to my lockpick teacher and see about getting her in here. So she's a lot of fun. It's kind of amazing how difficult people think it is, and they pick it up so quick. I mean, so it's like anyone that wants to learn how to pick a lock, will learn how to pick a lock. So that's part of the physical security test, and actually something is used. So we'll be looking at having someone come in and teach that. So basic components of a social engineering attack. Target evaluation assets target susceptibility to attack and their awareness of cybersecurity. So this is what it's testing against: pretexting, communicate a lie or incomplete truth to get a victim to believe a falsehood. So this is kind of your scenario, your story that you're trying to use to convince the victim. Psychological manipulation, exploit human decision-making, cognitive basis to craft more effective attacks, build relationships, get victim more friendly and comfortable to enhance your trust level, and motivate target to take action. So these are kind of interesting, some of the things people do for social engineering and the physical tests. We know there's someone local that used to be part of Dallas Hackers Association, and she had a prosthetic belly that made her look like she was pregnant. So she would go to a building and they had like a card access trying to get into the building, and she'd have like her hands full of Starbucks coffees or something. So anyone coming along is going to be nice and just let her in the building. So that was one of the things she used to get in. A lot of times people will go as far as getting uniforms created. They could get like a uniform to look like a telecom carrier or some kind of technical support to get access to the building. And they will clone badges that are used to get in the buildings and really go in a lot of detail trying to really pull this off. Some people are really good at it. It's interesting to hear some of the stories and you got to be really good. I mean, this social engineering is probably the original hacking. That's the original first thing you could ever hack before there was ever computers to hack, even before, you had, door locks, things or walls to prevent people from coming in. People were conning people. So the social engineering is almost like, conning people, working like being like a con artist. So there was one movie that came out years ago, and this guy goes to a lot of conferences and presents, or has gone to conference and presents. But that I think it was, I forget the name of the movie. You remember the one that yeah, Catch Me If You Can. Yeah, so that person goes to some conferences. So this guy was conning people, and so this guy actually has presented some conferences. So getting to that comfort level, and if you're going to be a penetration tester, you don't have to do social engineering. Sometimes that's part of it. Some people ethically don't feel right trying to con people. One of a good friend that runs Dallas Hackers Association, he did it for years, but he just felt like if you're going to train yourself to be dishonest, then he felt like he was kind of not being fair to himself morally, and didn't want and got out of doing that. But it just all depends on the person. If you see it as it's a job and you're doing that at the time, it's it's what you can live with. And it's also, are you comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with going up to a complete stranger and trying to get in the building? That can be kind of scary. I hear a lot of people that do this for a living. That's their main job, is doing physical testing, that when they get in the building, they're so nervous they have to go like in the bathroom and just hide out in the restroom until they can calm down. One of the physical pen testers said he carries a candy bar with him so he can have some, get some sugar into his system, and he starts to feel better. So, it can be kind of an adrenaline rush. I don't have a lot of experience with this myself. I did it once trying to gain physical access to a building, and it was relatively easy. But once you realize how just tailgating someone in, following someone in, if you don't have a badge into the building, can be pretty easy. And it depends on where the building you're trying to get into. If we're trying to do a test for some government agency or some heavily secured building, then it might be a little more intimidating. If you got armed guards walking around the building, it could be a little more scary. But this is like one area a lot of people specialize in. Some people, all they do is the social engineering and physical tests, and then some people will add this. If you're a pen tester, some people do this as well, and some people have a lot of fun. It's kind of interesting. Once you get into this, it gives more of a spy kind of feeling to your job. Motivation techniques, authority, scarcity, urgency, social proof, likeness, and fear. So authority is someone came in dressed like a police officer or manager. So if you're working at your company and someone's wanting in the building and they come up in a suit, they're on the phone, looks like they're in an important meeting, then people more likely to let them in. They're going to think this could be someone important. I don't want to not let them in the building. So this is how they use authority. And even like posing as a police officer, that's where you're getting kind of, kind of gray line, between what's legal and not. If you're posing as a police officer, you're impersonating a police officer. So I wouldn't recommend that. Yes.
Just to add on what you were saying before,
Uh-huh.
there's a podcast called Darknet Diaries.
Okay. Yeah.
And they have a lot of interesting episodes on physical beneficial
Mm-hmm.
and people that work for those kind of companies.
Yeah.
And they go on that show and explain how they do it, and they take you through their whole process. And it's really interesting.
That's a very good podcast. And actually, Jason and myself, we know someone that's been on there, Tinkersec.
Oh, yeah.
Tinker, we know him. He's the MC at Dallas Hackers.
Oh.
And I'm not sure, but I'm almost certain that Jack was on there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jack was on there. She was the one she's the prosthetic belly. And that one was kind of funny because she came to Dallas Hackers one time with the prosthetic belly and she's drinking, and boy, people were giving her dirty looks. But yeah, Darknet Diaries is a really good podcast. Everyone I talk to, everyone recommends that one. So yeah, Tinkersec was on there. I've got a webinar or a stream that I recorded whenever he came to Pwn School last semester. I used to have him come in each semester, but he went back to consulting, so I don't know if he'd be available to come into class, but we do have a recording of one of the talks he did for Pwn School, so you'll still be able to enjoy that. But thanks for bringing up the recommendation. That's a really good one. And scarcity, people attach value to uncommon objects or ideas. Example, attacker rewarding victim with unique collectible. So trying to bribe someone. Urgency, people attach value to temporary ideas. Attacker giving a limited time offer. So you send a phishing email out and you're trying to say, you can only get this special offer within a certain time. So that kind of gives people the urgency to click on it. And Shane brought up a good point too, similar to sales techniques. And so, yeah, a lot of salespeople are using these techniques. If you go back and look at any of Chris Hagnatty, the human hacker, he runs the social engineering village at DEF CON, and he's got some really good books out. But one of the things he goes in his books is really into the psychology of it, just understanding psychology, neurolingual programming, so you can kind of plant things in people's minds. So it's really interesting, the psychology behind it, the people that get really good. I mean, a lot of people that it's kind of a minor part of their job, won't go into that detail, but it's a really good book, and I can email out some resources for that. I got the audio book, and actually he's got a newer version of his book out on social engineering, and I used to listen to it while I was consulting on my flights to and from the locations. And it's really good information. It was really cool to get into the psychological part of it. Social proof, people tend to want to fit in and conform with a group. Example, attacker installs fake AV, victim does the same to appear competent. So they're trying to get them to do the same thing. Likeness, people are more often trust people like them. So attacker tries to be charming or persuasive, try to fit in, get them to like, so it's easier to get people to do things for you if they like you than if they dislike you. If you come in with, a bad attitude or being rude towards someone, they're less likely to do something. And fear, people who do irrational things to purge themselves of fear Example, attacker convincing a victim they will lose money if they don't comply. Another thing you can fear, if they think you're a manager or something, then some people think if they don't comply, they'll get fired. This kind of combines along with the authority and fear. So someone comes in posing to be a manager, someone with authority, that fear is going to also get them to obey too. Someone is worried about losing their job or getting in trouble. Phishing, a tactic where an attacker attempts to obtain sensitive information from a user posing as a trustworthy figure through email. So this is really popular. You see this one a lot. So it's pretty much self-explanatory that that you send out an email, get someone to click on it, trick them into doing that. That's a lot of ways that, like ransomware and viruses, are even. So yeah, ransomware viruses can be spread that way. And this is general, like emailing out to several people. Once you get to what's called a spearfishing attack, then you're targeting like a few certain individuals. Your typical phishing is where you send out an email to like several people in a company. It doesn't have to be a targeted company. Someone could find some email addresses or they just go through like Gmail and they're guessing usernames. You can go out and get like common lists of most popular usernames, and you can get that per country too. So you can get like most popular usernames like in India or the United States. And there's even lists based on on Facebook too, most popular first names and family names that you can combine lists and send those out to people. And so you can even spoof the from headers, so you can make it look like it's coming from a certain company. You can set up like doppelganger domains where you set up a domain name that looks similar to Microsoft. Maybe you replace the O with a 0 or something, or you make something like microsoftsupport.com and try to mimic that target that the company you're trying to pose as. And so some of these can get more serious. Like, for example, they're talking about an attacker sends email claiming to be a victim from victim's bank. So you can act like you're someone from that bank, or someone that works there, or even a customer. And these type of testing for this phishing is becoming more popular. This is something that more companies are starting to do internally. And for anyone that's on the stream, Jason's sharing some links to Darknet Diaries, and also from one of the Bug Crowd webinars that Jack was on. Tinker hasn't been on there yet. I was trying to get him to be on the live panel at DEF CON. He wasn't able to make it, but he said he'd be on our recording. So I need to hit him up again and see about getting him on the webinar, which is another one actually should be coming out pretty soon. They're going to start marketing this week. And here shows an example of a phishing email. And a lot of times, one of the ways it was popular to deliver ransomware a while back, people would send out an email being from like FedEx or UPS saying we got a package for you, because most people, they're going to be curious to see what their package. Maybe they ordered something and they're looking to see, check to make sure it's coming on time. So you send out phishing emails like that. Nowadays, everyone ordering stuff online, it's a real easy way for someone to find someone to click on a link to their phishing emails. Types of phishing: smishing. This is used by SMS, sending an SMS text message. Phishing is over the phone. This is voice, over a telephone, VoIP, or a mobile device. And real-time voice conversations can generate more trust. And then an example of this too, sometimes they're recording. Sometimes you get these robocalls. This is the IRS and you owe us money. So those are crazy. Anytime you get the IRS, you owe them money, you'll get a certified letter. You're not going to get a voice from them. There was something else I got recently that someone was trying to say as a lawsuit, and typically before in the past, they would be just a person calling you live, but now you're starting to see some of the robocalls. And so they get you to call back so they can try to take advantage of you. And farming, phishing that entices users through spoofed website. Victim interacts with website to provide info. One of my first social engineering engagements, I was doing phishing and farming. So we was part of farming. So I was the person that was calling up the target and leading them to a website. So we'd set up a website where they log into it. And our pretext was that we had pushed out a patch, a critical security patch, and some of the clients it didn't install on. So we wanted to make sure they had it installed. So I directed them to go to this website and type in their username and password, log in, that it would test their system to see if they had the virus or not, if they were, if they had the patch. And so we got several people that actually followed along. They complied, and it kind of helped me because I'd worked in IT. So one of the people had an Outlook problem, so I was able to help them through their Outlook problem and provide more convincing pretext. Whereas sometimes you get phished by some companies or some people that really didn't put enough time into it. They really didn't educate themselves enough on certain roles. But at any rate, whenever the person I was trying to get to go to the website come up and mention an Outlook problem, I had the same thing, because during that time, even though you're logged in, Outlook would prompt you to keep logging in. And so I walked them through fixing that problem. So fortunately, I was able to use that. But then we found someone that was suspicious, because when you're doing these type of calls, there's sites that will mask your telephone number to make it look like another telephone number. So you find like the range of phone numbers within a company and use that. And then some of the sites will actually even change your voice when you call. So it does something to change your voice whenever you call. And so a lot of companies that do this type of work will have their own server set up to do this, or their services. They allow a limited service for free. And then if you go up above a certain amount of call time, then you have to pay like a fee for it. Spearfishing, phishing that targets specific individuals or groups. Customized messages are more effective. And whaling, spearfishing that targets wealthy and or powerful people. High risk, high reward. Impersonation acts of pretending to be someone you're not. This is something you'll do through social engineering. Sometimes you're trying to pretend like you're someone within that company. Sometimes you just pretend to be, someone other than yourself, because you don't want to give someone your real name and stuff if you're trying to social engineer them. Because if you tell them your real name, then if they're savvy enough to go out on LinkedIn, they can go out there and look, oh yeah, they're a pen tester. They work for this company that does pen test for us, and figure out what's up and pretty much ruin your day as far as the phishing goes. So many social engineering attacks use impersonation, relies on a target not being able to identify attacker. Example attack: attacker pretends to be a help desk worker, calls employees to ask for their password. Targets may be less suspicious if they don't know who works at the help desk. Can be more effective in face-to-face interactions. People want to avoid appearing rude or dismissive. May be less likely to question an imposter. Relies on target not knowing what the real person looks like. Elicitation, the process of collecting or acquiring data from human beings. Different than information gathering about human beings. People may themselves provide key insights. Certain knowledge may only be available this way. An approach to use in social engineer attacks. Specific types: requests, interrogation, surveys, and observation. BEC often uses elicitation. Attacker impersonates executive, sends email to financial personnel requesting transfer of funds. Personnel approves transfer. You see this stuff all the time. I saw some things related to that recently, and actually Tinker talks about one of the engagements he was on, where he actually did that, sent the money to them to wire a certain amount of money over, and he also used the urgency part of it too, and as well as the authority. He was posing as a manager. We're making this acquisition. This money needs to be transferred now. So he was not only using the authority, he was also using the urgency. So sometimes if people think this got to be done right away, and it's someone from upper management in the company, they're going to be more likely to do it. And so these things, one of the things that's interesting too is if you ever get a suspicious email, never click on it. There's things you can do like highlight over URLs to see if it's the right URL or not, but also look at the grammar and spelling, because some of these things are coming from a company. If you get something from Apple, you're not going to see a bunch of grammar issues or misspelling in it. So that's something that's a red flag too that you can look for. And so you can see this email. So they're showing as urgent. So they got the urgency thing going there. And this is also the CFO. So they're also going with using the authority. Hoax is an element of social engineering in which the attacker presents a fictitious situation as real, similar to a scam, but not always about money. Examples: antivirus warnings that are themselves malware, email request an advance payment to large sums of money in the large sums of money in the future, email that says an account has been flagged for suspicious activity, blog post offering false advice that leads to damage. And here's an example of a hoax email. And so you can see where this person is emailing them and says, I hope you're doing well, that your family is joyful in this time. I am corresponding to inform you of a great opportunity that will benefit myself and yourself financially. My name is John Baker. I recently returned home from England after visiting the nation state. There's so many of these emails that come out from Nigeria that the Nigerian prince that sends you the money, said if you send me $3,000, then I'll give you $1 million. So you see where they're going with this. They're trying to entice them into scamming them so they can get part of this money. I did a couple of presentations for a Nigerian group. They're like some kind of organization out of Nigeria that is like a club or something, association that people go to for different meetings and that kind of thing. And they had a conference, and so that was interesting. I was going to kid with about getting emails from Nigerian princes, but I thought I probably shouldn't. They may not understand my humor, and I didn't want to offend anyone. But yeah, this is very common where someone has this money, and then sometimes it's people that got supposedly inherited some money, and they need $3,000 from you, and then they'll split it with you and all this. So if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Baiting, a social engineering attack in which an attacker leaves physical media in a location where someone else might pick it up and use it. This is like some of the malicious USBs. And one of the things that I always like to share with people just kind of getting started or taking these classes is once you learn ethical hacking and pen testing, you don't look at things the same way anymore. You go somewhere, most people that, even if you're in security and you've gone to different, meetups and conferences, when you see a USB laying on the ground, you always start to question whether it's legit or something's on there, something malicious. And the interesting thing is an interesting delivery method from someone local that's a pen tester. He was saying that he found a higher likelihood that if you got a USB that you want someone to use is put it like in a purse or like a wallet, and lay that. If it looks like a personal item, they're more likely to trust it. If it's just on the ground, enough people have seen Mr. Robot in some of these movies to think maybe it's dangerous. But if you put it in something personal, if you left a backpack somewhere or, like a purse or something, then if you had that USB drive in there, people are more likely to plug it in. I forget what kind of rate he said on that. He had like almost 100% success rate. So it looks like something personal, then people more likely to plug it in. And so this could be like USB drives. It could be like CD-ROMs, but more commonly you're seeing USB drives. and you set like auto run enable when someone plugs it in. So there's different things you can do. You can run scripts. You can imitate a HID device, which means that it acts like a keyboard. There's even some of these devices that can be used now that there's even going a step further than USB drives. There's some keyboards and mice that are vulnerable to similar types of attacks, which you don't have to even plug anything in. Just have this certain wireless device in your close enough proximity to a computer to be able to pull that off. But you can either have like malware or some kind of backdoors in there, so when they plug it in, you're able to access it. Jason Street is a very well-known ethical hacker and mainly specializes in physical and social engineering attacks. And he did a test recently where he went out and they've actually got some malicious USB cables that you can plug in. And he went around saying he was testing compliance of the systems, and everyone let him go plug the cable in. And he had like a little button that he pushed that made the USB cable inject the malware or the script that was running. And people would actually let him plug that in there. He said, I'm from the help desk and I need to test this, or I'm for IT. And so that goes back to posing as someone that's technical in the company, work on the computers. But he said that they put that on there, and instead of having like a backdoor or some kind of shell to connect to the system, it just popped up like a notepad, and it said something about test complete, smiley face, or something like smiley face emoji. And then people later on, after they told them that this was part of a test and they had let him plug the cable in, everyone said, yeah, I thought it was kind of weird that he was pushing a button whenever he plugged the cable in. So, but that's just human nature. That's, you really have to train people to be careful of those kind of things, because some good points that like Tinker brings up is like, from security awareness, you don't want to make people mistrust everyone. You don't want that. So there's other ways to train people. But so yeah, definitely usually after you do social engineering tests, typically a lot of consulting companies may follow up with security awareness training. They'll go through and review what they were able to do on site with the customers, and then tell them things that they should do to avoid being victims to those types of attacks. URL hijacking, a social engineering attack which an attacker exploits the typing mistakes that users made when attempting to navigate a website. This is also called typo squatting, and this is kind of when you get into the doppelgangers, where you create an address that looks similar. So you could put something in there where, yeah, like you see right here where they show CompTIA, they spelt it COMTPIA. So you know how sometimes you're typing stuff in and you kind of accidentally type it in wrong, so it's playing on these mistakes. So they put this site out there. It could have malware in there, some malicious link, and then someone actually types in the wrong URL, then they could be susceptible to whatever payloads residing on that website. And with those type of attacks, you can download that use tools. Like actually one of them is HTTP Track. It's like a website cloner. It downloads all the files, so you can create a site to look just like the original site. So they can, a lot of times attackers and pen testers are really good at making the site look like the actual vendor site. And so it also encompasses wrong top level domains, so CompTIA.gov. So this is reserved for usually governments use the .gov, so you can change that, or you can use CompTIA.net. They might not own the CompTIA.net domain name, and you can obfuscate the domains, subdomains. So right here, they took CompTIA and divided it. So they actually bought the TIA.org domain, and this login.comp is actually just the subdomain. So people see that, they'll see it looks like login.comptia. If you don't pay attention to that period dividing the P and the T, then you may view that as one complete word. Different words from the word form, so because the CompTIA.org. Companies expend effort to combat this. Some URLs fail, some URLs fall through the crack. In spam, an attack where the user's inbox is flooded with unsolicited messages, and we've all witnessed this. Advertisements, promotions, get rich schemes, and some of these sometimes are just legitimate. They're trying to get you to buy their product, but then some of this could be have some malicious payloads in it. And along the lines of spam, another way that ransomware is distributed is through the little pop-ups, the little banner walls on websites. Sometimes attackers will hack those sites and they'll replace it with their images, and they'll connect the link, so whenever that page loads, then it'll download the malware or the ransomware to your system. So that's one way it's being delivered. And spam is spam over IM. So you see a lot of this. A lot of people on Facebook Messenger, they get a link, and then all of a sudden now they're posting stuff up to other people's timeline or their own timeline with links to either something malicious or trying to lead someone to a site to purchase things. This is hard to pull off due to IM synchronous nature. Also, you kind of, if it's someone you know, then, and a lot of times you just got people unknowingly passing on stuff that don't mean anything by it. They clicked on the wrong thing. Filters and email IM clients make spam and spam less effective. Volume is still so great that it snares users every day. Shoulder surfing. So this is basically where you're looking over someone's shoulder to see what password they're typing in. And you can record that with a camera, or the attacker can just write down the password and then return later to log into your system. Or if it's like network credentials, then they could possibly log into another system that's not being used. Tailgating, this is when you just kind of follow someone into a secure area, say they've got a badge to get in the building, or even like a keypad they type in, you just kind of follow behind them. And there's some companies that put in some really good devices that when you're walking in, there's like a little gate that you have to card in to go through, and they'll usually allow only one person at a time. Some of those are pretty good, and also with the alarms. So if someone tries to go through it, it sets off an alarm. So those are really good protection. I've seen that in some buildings that really practice good physical security. And part of these, when you're doing any kind of pen test, this includes physical or social engineering, you want to give remediation tips. So some of these things, if you go in somewhere where there is nothing to protect from tailgating, then you'll want to tell your customer or your employer, if you're doing it for your employer, the test, let them know of different types of systems, hardware that you can install to prevent tailgating, or even just on top of that, just security awareness. Someone just shared on here that hackers use fake NordVPN website to deliver banking Trojan. And for part of these, for this, the tailgating attack to work, it says requires doors to not close too quickly, employee not paying attention, non-attentive security personnel waiting. And usually this is real common on side entrances to buildings. The main entrance, usually you got security watching on, but the side entrances and back entrances aren't usually monitored as well, maybe by camera, but they usually don't have security personnel. Piggybacking, similar to tailgating, but target knows someone is following them. Might know attacker personally and can be an accomplice. So yeah, they're kind of helping them in. And this brings up another good point. A lot of attacks sometimes are internal. So people get disgruntled internal and help other people out, or they're just trying to get ahead. They have some inside knowledge and they're sharing it with someone else to try to make money off of it, or either that or get revenge on their employer. It says, or might be ignorant of the attack, doesn't know an attack was terminated, lets them in like a normal day. More than likely the target doesn't know the attacker, lets them in out of common courtesy, may want to avoid confrontation. And this is where talking about letting someone in. Maybe they got they're carrying a lot of things and can't get in the building. Maybe it's raining and people feel sorry for them and let them in without checking their IDs. In that case, you should always ask someone what's your ID, or escort them to physical security to get an ID, because sometimes people say, I forgot my access card at home, and they won't go back and get it. This actually happens sometimes, but it's also a pretext to someone trying to get in. Guidelines for performing social engineering tests. understand basic components of social engineering, leverage motivation techniques, launch a phishing attack to entice targets to leak sensitive info, use media other than just email for phishing, create a convincing forgery of a popular website, also badges, capture credentials through login forms on the forged websites, leverage gathered data about people to spearfish specific targets, consider targeting high level personnel on phishing. Use impersonation to make attacks seem more authentic. Use elicitation to get targets to reveal info. Leverage hoax to make attacks more convincing. Drop a USB drive loaded with malware in a parking lot. Determine how users fall victim to mistyped URLs. Leverage spam techniques and phishing attacks. See how easy it is to observe employees without their knowledge. Consider how environment might take tailgating, piggybacking more or less effective. And also with the USBs, another way to get USBs more enticing to plug into a system is you can label it. You could label it like secret, or you could label as payroll or something. So someone thinks it's payroll, they might want to see what other people in their company are making and get curious and plug that in. Some of the movies are starting to get more realistic with some of the social engineering. There was a movie came out a couple years called Black Hat, and this guy was trying to gain access to a building, so he acted like he was going in for an interview, and he said that he had spilled coffee on his resume. Could they print out another copy? So he hands them the USB stick, and they plug it in to print out his resume. In this case, you can actually have legitimate documents on there. So you can have documents with backdoors embedded in them. You can embed backdoors into Word documents and PDFs. So you can make it look more legitimate. So whenever the person that's opening that file looks like a normal file opening up, and if it all works out for the attacker, they can get past that. Okay, so that this describes an activity, and we'll just kind of go over this real quick. Passive recon didn't reveal much about the company's internal network. You'll need to find a way in. You bait users with USB thumb drives dropped in the parking lot. USB drives are loaded with malware. A curious employee will hopefully pick it up, plug it into their computer. This will hopefully give you your way into the network. And interesting videos to watch is if you look at the Rfid 7 videos, and they have different stories from pen testers, and they talk about some of the different techniques they've done to get on networks, like with thumb drives and just different ways that they've social engineered their way into the company. Those are kind of interesting to watch. And so here shows the information. Okay, this shows like the different steps they provided, and here shows like the social media and job board that they use for social engineering. It says asset, company IT skills weakness, USB baiting attack, baited stick, plugged into internal machine, create administrator account, hacker, or on internal user machine, and then they got the screen cap of that attack showing that it's susceptible to USB baiting. Harvesting credentials through phishing. You want to expand your social engineering campaign. Employees have fallen victim to phishing in the past. You set up a fake Google sign-in page. You entice your profile, and you'll entice users to your profile in a passive recon to follow a link to the page. The phishing message will indicate urgency and demand to be action to be taken. User will hopefully enter their credentials in this fake form. You may be able to use these to capture credentials elsewhere. So here it shows the logged in what they use, the social engineering toolkit for phishing. Physical security controls. You may be up against door handle locks, surveillance cameras, security guards, lighting that makes nighttime intruders visible, fences, gates, or other physical barriers, and man traps, alarms, and motion sensors. Fence jumping, the act of going over a fence. It includes fences, gates, walls, etc. Might be easier to go over a short fence, around or through it, prevent people from casually walking through restricted area, extend all around perimeter, and made of a real strong metal, can attract suspicion if seen. And they better hope it's not electrified. It's kind of interesting. Anyone that's gone through the CISSP, I don't know how much they still do, but they used to cover a lot of stuff about physical security from fence heights and all that. So taller fences 8 foot or above cannot be jumped and must be climbed, designed to be difficult to climb without effort. Ladder helps you scale fence, but will draw suspicion. Barbed or razor wire is even stronger anti-fence jumping measure. Situated top of a fence will cause serious injury if you attempt to go over it. Openings can be made with the right tools. Dumpster diving. And this is where you going through the trash containers outside of a building, the dumpsters, trying to find any kind of information that could be useful in a penetration test. Calendars with passwords. Sometimes people have sticky notes on it. There's, sometimes official or sensitive documents that are put out. You can get, information from financial reports. You can get contacts. So someone prints an email out or a list of contacts within the company, then you could possibly come along and get information from that. And you may be able to piece together shredded documents. I've actually heard of people doing that, go through getting the shredded documents and try to put them together. So that's where it's important for companies to have the cross-cut type of shredder, so it shreds both ways instead of just lengthwise, so that way it's a lot harder to reassemble. Organizations can also dispose of computing equipment. So if they don't wipe the drives and you're able to pull information from that. Actually, Richland was involved in an interview with CBS. They went and purchased some phones from Goodwill online, and they weren't wiped, so they wanted to see. Well, some of them were wiped and some but the majority weren't. A lot of these people, when they donated the phones, they thought that the company that was receiving them, like Goodwill, was securely wiping the phones, and they didn't. So they were able to retrieve a lot of information on people, like their Facebook accounts. They were able to track down several people from these phones. So personally, if you ever get rid of a computer, then you want to download a program that actually securely erases the data on your computer. So if an attacker gets their hands on the stuff, they could go through, and if the data hasn't been erased, it may be there still in clear text, or if it's not securely wiped, it could be retrieved from using different tools similar to what you'd use in forensics. Will draw suspicion if you're seen. Dumpsters usually placed out of view, maybe outside restricted areas, easier for trash pickup. Organization, lock picking and bypassing. Organizations will lock doors, cabinets, safes, devices. This is where your lock picking comes in. If you're doing a physical pen test, locks can be cut to your physical testing. In short, if you can't find a way around them. Type of locks influences how you get around it. Key locks are very common and require the correct key to open. Use pen tumblers, interchangeable cores, or wafer springs. Bolt cutters and hacksaws may be available to destroy poorly made locks. You can also try to pick a lock, a skill that requires practice and the right tools. Vendors sell lock picking kits, usually for pen tumbler locks. Not very effective against high security locks. And you'll see some people that do physical pen tests that they'll try to get around. They usually use lock picking as a last measure. Some doors, some people get like a little crowbar and pull the door out a little ways where they can open the door. There's little tools that you can use. It looks like an ice pick that's bent on the end. It's like an L. So you can stick that through the door on some door locks and pull back and unlock the door that way. So there's, and then you see how people used to use credit cards. Sometimes there's some lock still vulnerable to a credit card. So making basic lock picking process, use a picking tool to raise and lower pins until you flush with the shear line. Use a tensioner wrench on lock plug to hold pins, pick pins in place. Repeat with remaining pins. Use torsion wrench to turn plug to disengage the lock. So once you raise those up, you got this other tool that's kind of a flat L-shaped piece, and you can turn it. Then once you get the pins in the right place, when you rotate the lock to unlock it. Not all locks use keys. Some of them use combination, access card, biometric. Keyless locks must be either destroyed or bypassed. Simple combination locks can be brute forced. Access card biometric locks are more difficult to bypass, although you can clone the access cards if you get the right tools. May need to think outside the box to bypass keyless lock. What if the lock is only active during off hours? Try again during a certain time. RFID is standard for identifying and keeping track of objects, physical locations through radio waves. Many different applications in physical security used with ID badges. RFID is attached to the badge, includes an antenna and a microchip. Lock containing RFID readers send signals to the surrounding area. Tag's antenna picks up signal and the microchip returns to the reader. Reader receives signal and opens lock if authenticated. RFID badges don't need to be waved in front of a reader, can be inside of a bag or on someone's shirts. Sometimes people will carry it like in a bag. Some of the readers will read up to like 3 foot away. RFID authentication systems can support granular access. Personnel used unique bags. The badge is a key that mitigates lockpicking. Badge cloning, the act of copying an RFID badge to another badge, enables an attacker to obtain credentials without stealing a badge. Can be done through handheld RFID readers, inexpensive and easy to use. Hold up to badge writer, press copy button on blank badge and write to the copy. Can also be done through RFID receivers concealed in bags and several feet away. Most effective against 12 kilohertz EM 4100 protocol. Doesn't support encryption, transmits data to nearby receivers. Newer badge technology uses higher frequencies, faster data rate, supports encryption, and only broadcasts certain attributes. Encryption-based badges can still be cloned, requires Android device with near-field communication and cloning app. App comes with default keys issued by manufacturer. If organization doesn't change keys, badges can be cloned. Motion detection bypass. Motion detection systems detect movement to identify an unauthorized physical access. Sensors placed at key entrances and exits. Most detect changes to infrared spectrum. Some detect human-based emissions. Some detect blocking patterns. Some detect deviations from baseline. Sensors will trigger alarms or fail-safes. Simple bypass involves finding blind spots, identify what zones are covered by sensors, stay out of these zones. Not always feasible if zones are too wide or sensors are too hard to find. Placing material over sensor, trying to place material over your own body if you can't reach the sensor, not always effective. Requires moving slowly to a large blocking object. Blocking attacks won't fool all sensors. Try focusing an infrared light at a sensor, stops human-based infrared and doesn't rely on blocking, not effective against baseline comparing sensors. Some interesting ways of getting in. When I was at my first company that I was going through pen testing, we went through a class and they showed a technique for some of the sensors on the doors that are like above the door. It's kind of like a magnetic kind of lock. And you could take like a fly swatter and there's like a sensor and you could take the fly swatter, bend it and have it go in front of the sensor and the motion sensor and it'll actually unlock it. And then you hear some people taking the compressed air and spraying in there and it will see something as a solid object and it'll unlock. So there's all sorts of interesting ways people found to bypass locks. Guidelines for performing physical security tests on facilities. Identify physical security controls in place at large in a target organization. Look for low fences to entrances and other restricted areas. Consider using a ladder to scale taller fence. Consider the danger of scaling a fence with barbed wire, razor wire. Look for dumpsters that may contain sensitive materials. Calendars with passwords, sensitive business documents, storage devices, and computing equipment. Practice with lock picking tools. Find other ways around keyless locks. use handheld RFID writer to clone badges, conceal cloning tool and bag to read data from several feet away, use an Android device app to clone encrypted RFID badges that use default keys, identify the area a motion sensor covers, leverage motion sensors blind spots to move through a building. Consider using a piece of material to block motion sensor, focus infrared light on sensor to fool it. You want to apply your passive recon results to your physical security test. You found the company's main office location and other info. You'll start testing by surveilling and gaining access to the building. And here, once again, it shows the steps that they used during this activity.